What's going on, Ann Kemp? This is Justin Gibney, president of the Ann Campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out into the public square, we can engage in a more effective and informed manner. The other reason why these civic updates are important is because we want to make sure that Christians are framing the issues for themselves, especially when issues have moral implications. We need to make sure that we're not completely reliant on how conservatives talk about the issue or reliant on how progressives talk about the issue. Because the fact of the matter is they could both be wrong. And if we're just following behind one of them, then we will be wrong too. We have to make sure that the issue is framed properly, because if a question isn't framed properly, then you can end up with two wrong answers instead of being able to get to the truth and the right answer. So Christians have to make sure that we are framing issues from a biblical worldview and being able to talk about it from a gospel-centered perspective. That takes time, it takes thoughtfulness, and it takes us knowing the word. So we want to help you do that. We want to help folks get to the truth and get to the right answers. And so thank you for joining us on today's civic update. I want to talk about today really what everybody is talking about, which is the Trump tweets and the Trump rally. And then I want to go get into a concept called whataboutism that I think is really a big problem within our political discourse. So the first thing is, those of you who were following the Ann Campaign yesterday know that we issued a statement. And we issued a statement denouncing Trump's tweets and what happened at that Greenville, North Carolina rally. We wanted to denounce those things in no uncertain terms. The president, what was said by the president was unacceptable. It was racist. It was reprehensible. And even worse, it may have very well put a lot of people in dangerous circumstances. By talking about people in the way that the president did, he creates a hostile environment in this country that could get people hurt. And we will not stand by and just watch that happen without being very clear that we are willing to do what's necessary to make sure that this does not happen again. It is unacceptable. It should have never happened. And so if you haven't read our statement, take a moment. You can go on the Crux and the Call website and you can read the statement that the Ann Campaign made about this particular issue. Those comments were unacceptable. To give you a little background about what happened, earlier this week, a group called The Squad, which is four women who are freshmen in the United States House of Representatives. They are all women of color. They've been very hard on the president, just as how the Ann Campaign has, when it comes to what's going on at the border. That what's going on at the border is not acceptable, and apparently the president wanted to respond to that. So he wanted to respond either because he was trying to rile up his base, or that he just had a moment where what we've seen before, where he didn't have a whole lot of emotional maturity. And he responded in one of the tweets by saying, if you don't like what's going on in this country, and this is a paraphrase, then you can go back to where you came from. And that comment is problematic for several reasons. But number one, I would say, is that's a patently racist way to address people of color. That is something that's been said over and over again. If you don't like it here, then you can leave. First of all, that's not how this country works, but it's a patently racist statement, right? If you don't like how this country works, this country was built and the system is built for you to voice your concerns and for you to make sure and for you to do what's necessary to change the thing. So everybody has a right to say what they want to say, especially people who were elected. Mr. President, you have to realize that these women were elected to office to question you, to tell you how they think this country should be run. So they have every right to make those statements without having you come at them like that. Unacceptable. It should have never been said. And the other thing is, that's an ahistorical statement. It doesn't even make sense in the context of America, which was established by immigrants, which was built up by slaves and immigrants. How are you going to tell somebody to go home? All these women are naturalized citizens. 3 of them were born here. The one that wasn't born here is a citizen. So what are you talking about? They should go home. They are home. And we want to let them know that we do think that they are home, and that the statements that were made by the president, again, were racist and reprehensible. And I think Christians should be very clear about our disagreements with that particular statement. Nobody should be, especially the president, should be creating a hostile environment where people could get hurt because now people feel like it's okay to disrespect people because of their skin color or because of their nationality. That is unacceptable. And we will not stand by and just watch it happen. And that's why we thought that statement was necessary. We always talk about the importance of the Christian witness. When we're engaging in politics, when we're engaging in the public square, what do people see? What do they believe that Christianity is about based on how we're acting? Do they just see people who are following behind their party? Do they just see people who are pursuing their own self-interest with disregard for the well-being of others? I would certainly hope not. I would hope that they're seeing Jesus in us because we care about human dignity and we care about human flourishing. And through the comments made and the chant that was going on, so the chant was send her back, send her back. Human dignity and the human flourishing of others were violated because of that. And we want to be clear about that. So I think that any Christian leaders who are associated with the president, it would be good for you to make sure that you condemn this statement, that you denounce it in no uncertain terms and let people know that you don't think it's acceptable and that you'll use your influence to make sure that it never happens again. Because one of the problems that happened after these statements and after the rally is that some of the folks in the president's party most of the folks were very slow to criticize and denounce what happened. And even when they did criticize and denounce it, it was always with some qualification, or they always had to first refer to the ladies and say that. That's a watered down equivocation that should not happen. When somebody says something that's xenophobic and racist, it should be condemned, period. You don't have to qualify it. You don't have to say that I don't agree with who he was talking to, because you want to make sure that you're addressing the dangerous part of what was going on first. Right? Now, anybody who's being reasonable is not going to assume that because you condemn a racist comment made by the president, that you support everything that the squad or anybody else is doing. Anybody who's going to do that is not being reasonable anyway. So make sure that we're clear when we condemn things like that, because this goes into the conversation that I was talking about of what aboutism. What aboutism is a concept that basically says part of the reason we're in the situation we're in when it comes to our public discourse is because when a criticism comes to a certain party, instead of correcting or examining what's going on, they automatically say, well, what about the other party? So if somebody comes to me and says, Justin, you know that in Illinois and New York, they just passed these abortion laws that are some of the most extreme abortion laws in the world. There's only a few countries, North Korea, China, and a few others that have abortion laws that are this extreme, which is the truth. If I automatically come and say, well, what about the Republicans? Look at what the Republicans are doing. That's whataboutism. Because I'm not examining what's going on in my party. I'm not correcting what's going on in my party. I'm just saying, well, what are they doing? Look at what they're doing, which means that my side will never get corrected because I just want to focus on other things. That's exactly what happened in this case in many instances. There were a lot of conservative commentators, not everybody, that instead of just clearly condemning what happened, had to automatically say, well, look at what the Democrats are doing. Look at what this group is doing. And in a way, that's a form of almost moral relativism, where we're basing what's right and wrong off of whether or not it's worse than what the other side is doing. That is a terrible way to go, and that's part of the reason that we're spiraling out of control. If what I'm willing to address is only good or bad based on what the other side is doing, so I'm not going to address it if the other side is doing something worse, that means that both sides just keep getting worse and worse and worse, and nobody's there to check it. Christians cannot be so focused on taking sides that we're not willing to call out what is wrong. Even if there's something worse going on, we can call out that too. But we have to be able to call out what's wrong, not based on if we think somebody else is worse. So that's whataboutism. Make sure that the next time somebody comes to you with a criticism of your party or a criticism of your ideological tribe, that you don't just automatically say, well, what about the other side? That you process it, that you examine it, and if it is indeed wrong, regardless of what else is going on, then you say it's wrong, you call it out, and you try to get folks to do better. That's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me again for the Civic Update. If you want more information like this, you can always listen to the Church Politics Podcast with myself and Michael Ware. Thank you again for listening. I will see you next week. And Kemp, take care.